They say money can't buy happiness, but it can sure as hell buy betrayal. In the world of billionaires and power brokers, love is just another currency to be traded. Trust is a luxury few can afford. And family. Well, family is something you build, or something that gets torn apart by greed. She thought she had it all: the fairy tale marriage, the perfect life, the promise of forever. What she didn't know was that she'd been living inside someone else's carefully orchestrated lie. But here's the thing about underestimating a woman with nothing left to lose. Sometimes the prey becomes the predator. And when that happens, empires fall. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Malibu mansion, its waves catching the golden light of another perfect California sunset. Emma Rodriguez Sterling stood in the nursery she had been lovingly preparing for months, one hand resting on her 7-month pregnant belly, the other adjusting a tiny mobile of silver stars above the mahogany crib. At 28, she possessed the kind of understated elegance that came from generations of old money. Dark hair swept into a sophisticated chignon, intelligent brown eyes that sparkled with warmth, and the quiet confidence of someone who had never known want. "Soon, little one," she whispered to her unborn child, her voice filled with anticipation. "Mommy and Daddy can't wait to meet you." The nursery was a masterpiece of luxury and love. Hand-painted murals of enchanted forests covered the walls. A crystal chandelier cast rainbow prisms across the room, and every piece of furniture had been custom-made by the finest artisans money could buy. This was the life Emma had always known. But more importantly, it was the life she wanted to give her child. Her husband, Alexander Sterling, had built his financial empire from nothing, transforming himself from a scholarship student at Wharton into one of the world's youngest billionaires. At 35, he commanded respect in boardrooms across the globe, his sterling financial empire controlling assets worth over $50 billion. Their love story had been the stuff of fairy tales: the brilliant self-made billionaire and the princess of the Rodriguez dynasty, one of America's most powerful business families. Emma's father, Santiago Rodriguez, had built Rodriguez Industries from a single construction company into a multinational conglomerate spanning real estate, technology, and energy. The Rodriguez name carried weight in political circles, their influence reaching from Silicon Valley to Washington, D.C. When Emma married Alexander 3 years ago, it had been hailed as the merger of two titans, a union that would reshape the business landscape. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of private jets to Paris, weekend getaways on Alexander's 200-foot yacht, and intimate dinners in restaurants that closed their doors to other patrons just to accommodate them. Alexander had proposed on a moonlit beach in Santorini, going down on one knee as fireworks exploded overhead, a display he had arranged just for her. Their wedding had been featured on the cover of Forbes, dubbed the Billionaire Wedding of the Century. Emma had given up her position as vice president of strategic development at Rodriguez Industries to focus on building their family. She had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, but her greatest ambition now was to be the mother she had always dreamed of becoming. Alexander had been supportive, even encouraging, telling her that their child would be the heir to both empires. The pregnancy had been a journey of pure joy. Alexander attended every doctor's appointment, his usual stern demeanor melting away whenever he heard their baby's heartbeat. He would spend hours with his hand on Emma's belly, talking to their child about the future they would build together. Emma had never felt more loved, more secure, more complete, but perfect facades have a way of cracking when you least expect them to. It started with small things: Alexander working later hours, taking mysterious phone calls in his study, business trips that seemed to multiply without explanation. Emma attributed it to the stress of expanding Sterling Financial into European markets, a deal worth tens of billions that had consumed Alexander's attention for months. The first real crack appeared on a stormy Thursday evening in October. Emma had been reading in the living room, classical music playing softly in the background, when she heard Alexander's voice rising from his study. The door was slightly ajar, and something in his tone made her pause. He was speaking in hushed, urgent whispers, but the acoustics of the marble hallway carried his words clearly. "I told you," Scarlett, we have to be patient just a little longer. Once the baby is born, and I have secured my claim to the Rodriguez connection, we can be together openly. Emma's blood turned to ice. Scarlett. She knew that name, Scarlett Madison, the stunning 26-year-old model and aspiring actress who had been making waves in Hollywood. Emma had seen her at several charity galas, always impeccably dressed, always drawing attention with her platinum blonde hair and surgically enhanced curves. "I'm tired of hiding, Alex," came a sultry voice through the phone speaker. "You promised me we'd be together after you got what you needed from that little princess." Alexander's laugh was cold, calculating. Emma served her purpose. She gave me access to the Rodriguez fortune and connections I could never have built on my own. The pregnancy just seals the deal. I'll have a child with Rodriguez blood, ensuring my place in their dynasty. But Scarlett, darling, you're the woman I actually want to spend my life with. Emma's knees buckled. She gripped the doorframe, her pregnant belly suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. The man she loved, the father of her child, had been using her all along. Their entire marriage had been a business transaction disguised as a love story. "What about the wife?" Scarlett's voice dripped with disdain. "She's not going to just disappear." "Leave Emma to me," Alexander replied, his voice taking on a sinister edge. "I've been documenting her every mistake, every moment of weakness, postpartum depression, inability to handle the pressures of wealth, emotional instability. I'll have enough to prove she's unfit to raise our child. The courts will give me full custody, especially with the Rodriguez family's influence behind me." Emma pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. The room began to spin as the full scope of Alexander's betrayal became clear. He hadn't just been unfaithful, he had orchestrated their entire relationship as an elaborate con game. "And then," Scarlett pressed, "then I'll have everything: the child, the Rodriguez connections, control of both empires through strategic positioning. Emma will be discarded like the naive little princess she is, and you and I will rule together." The phone call ended, and Emma heard Alexander's footsteps approaching the door. She fled as quietly as her pregnant form would allow, making it back to the living room just as he emerged from his study. When he found her there, reading with perfect composure despite the tears threatening to spill down her cheeks, he smiled that charming smile that had once made her heart race. "How's our little prince or princess tonight?" he asked, was placing his hand on her belly with practiced affection. Emma forced herself to smile, though every fiber of her being wanted to scream. "Active as always. I think this one's going to be a fighter. Just like his daddy," Alexander said with a confidence that now sounded like arrogance. That night, as Alexander slept peacefully beside her, Emma stared at the ceiling and planned. She was indeed her father's daughter, and Santiago Rodriguez had not built an empire by being weak or naive. If Alexander wanted to play games, she would show him what a Rodriguez was truly capable of. The next morning, while Alexander was at his downtown office, Emma made a phone call to Marcus Thompson, a private investigator her father had used for years. Marcus was discreet, thorough, and expensive, exactly what she needed. "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said when he arrived at the mansion that afternoon, "your father speaks very highly of you. How can I help?" Emma handed him a check for $50,000, pocket money for someone with her resources. "I need you to follow my husband. Document everything: where he goes, who he sees, what he does. I particularly want to know about his relationship with Scarlett Madison." Marcus nodded professionally. "How long do you want surveillance?" "Until I have enough evidence to destroy him," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. For 3 months, Marcus worked in shadows, compiling a dossier that would have impressed the FBI. Video footage of Alexander and Scarlett at intimate dinners, hotel receipts, phone records, email communications, a paper trail of deception that painted a clear picture of not just infidelity, but criminal conspiracy. Emma also discovered that she had underestimated Scarlett Madison. The woman wasn't just a pretty face looking for a rich husband. She was a sophisticated con artist with a history of targeting wealthy men. Marcus uncovered 3 previous relationships with millionaires, each ending with mysterious deaths or financial ruin for her victims. There were whispers about a casino mogul in Las Vegas who had died in an accident shortly after changing his will in Scarlett's favor. "This woman is dangerous. Mrs. Sterling," Marcus warned during one of their secret meetings at a small cafe in Santa Monica. "I think you should involve law enforcement." Emma shook her head. "Not yet. I want to handle this my way first." The confrontation came sooner than Emma had planned. Alexander announced that he would be hosting a charity gala at the Beverly Hills Hotel to celebrate closing the largest deal in Sterling Financial's history, a partnership with European investors worth $10 billion. It would be attended by 500 of the world's most powerful people, from tech billionaires to Hollywood royalty to heads of state. "It'll be the perfect venue to announce our exciting news," Alexander said over breakfast, his hand resting on Emma's belly. "What news?" Emma asked, though she suspected she already knew. Alexander's smile was predatory. "I think it's time the world knew that you're not cut out for this life. Darling, the stress of being a billionaire's wife has clearly been too much for you. Everyone's been talking about your emotional instability lately." Emma's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, Emma," Alexander said with mock sympathy. "The way you've been acting, the mood swings, the paranoia, the accusations. My lawyers think it would be best if you voluntarily committed yourself to a private facility after the baby's born, just until you're feeling better." The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Alexander had been systematically isolating her from friends, documenting her every emotional moment during pregnancy, building a case to have her declared mentally unfit. Once she was institutionalized, he would have complete control of their child and access to the Rodriguez fortune through his role as the child's father. That evening, as Emma prepared for what would become the most important night of her life, she made one final phone call. "Daddy," she said when Santiago answered, "I need you." The Beverly Hills Hotel gleamed like a jewel against the night sky, its iconic pink facade illuminated by thousands of twinkling lights. The ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland, with ice sculptures, white roses, and crystal chandeliers creating an atmosphere of ethereal beauty. 500 guests in designer gowns and custom tuxedos mingled with champagne flutes, their conversations a symphony of power and privilege. Emma arrived fashionably late, her entrance designed for maximum impact. She wore a flowing midnight blue maternity gown that accentuated her pregnant silhouette while maintaining an air of regal elegance. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, family heirlooms worth more than most people's homes. Her hair was styled in an intricate updo, her makeup flawless, despite the emotional turmoil beneath the surface. Alexander stood near the stage with Scarlett, who looked stunning in a form-fitting red dress that left little to the imagination. They were surrounded by investors and celebrities, Alexander holding court with his characteristic charisma, while Scarlett played the role of his devoted companion. As Emma made her way through the crowd, she could feel the eyes of 500 people tracking her movement. Whispers followed in her wake speculation about the state of her marriage, her mental health, her fitness to be part of high society. Alexander's campaign of character assassination had been more effective than she had realized. Emma, darling, called Victoria Ashworth, a prominent socialite known for her vicious gossip. "You look absolutely radiant. How are you feeling?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Emma could hear the underlying probing. Everyone was watching for signs of the instability Alexander had been claiming. "I've never felt better, Victoria," Emma replied with a serene smile. "Pregnancy suits me, don't you think?" As she moved through the crowd, Emma positioned herself near the stage where Alexander was preparing to give his speech. She caught his eye and saw a flicker of something, surprise annoyance. He had probably hoped she would stay home, playing the role of the unstable wife who couldn't handle public appearances. Alexander stepped up to the microphone, his commanding presence immediately drawing the attention of the entire ballroom. He looked every inch the successful billionaire in his custom Armani tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled, his confident smile suggesting a man who had the world at his feet. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. Tonight marks a historic moment for Sterling Financial Empire. The partnership we're announcing represents not just a business deal, but the beginning of a new era of global cooperation and prosperity. The crowd applauded politely. Though Emma could sense their anticipation, everyone knew Alexander Sterling didn't call press conferences just to talk about business deals. But tonight is about more than just money, Alexander continued, his tone becoming more personal. It's about the future I'm building not just for my company, but for my family. He gestured toward Emma, and she felt hundreds of pairs of eyes turned toward her. She maintained her composure, one hand resting protectively on her belly. My wife Emma and I are expecting our first child in just 2 months, Alexander announced, generating warm applause. But I have to be honest with all of you, this pregnancy has been challenging for Emma. The pressures of our lifestyle, the constant scrutiny, the demands of being married to someone in my position, it's taken a toll. Emma's smile never wavered, but inside, she felt the trap closing around her. Alexander was executing his plan perfectly, using this public forum to establish her alleged mental instability. Emma's been struggling with severe mood swings, paranoid delusions, and emotional outbursts. Alexander continued, his voice filled with what sounded like genuine concern. My doctors believe she's experiencing an extreme form of prenatal depression. For her own safety and the safety of our child, she'll be entering a private treatment facility immediately after delivery. The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Emma could feel the weight of their stares, the mixture of pity and judgment in their eyes. Alexander had just publicly humiliated her in front of the most powerful people in the world, painting her as mentally unstable while positioning himself as the long-suffering, devoted husband. But I'm not alone in facing these challenges, Alexander said, his tone brightening. I've been fortunate to have the support of someone very special during this difficult time. He extended his hand toward Scarlett, who glided onto the stage with the grace of a predator. The crowd's shock was palpable. Everyone could see exactly what was happening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Scarlett Madison, who will be joining our family as my wife once Emma's treatment is complete and our divorce is finalized. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Cameras flashed, voices rose in animated conversation, and Emma felt the full force of public humiliation wash over her. Alexander had just announced his intention to divorce his pregnant wife for his mistress, all while framing it as a mercy to Emma's alleged mental illness. But instead of crumbling under the weight of this betrayal, Emma felt something else entirely, a cold, burning rage that reminded her exactly whose daughter she was. She began walking toward the stage, her movements deliberate and graceful despite her advanced pregnancy. The crowd parted before her, sensing that something dramatic was about to unfold. Alexander saw her approach and had the audacity to smile, probably thinking she was going to beg for mercy in front of 500 witnesses. Emma reached the base of the stage and looked up at her husband, the man who had systematically destroyed her life while pretending to love her. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the ballroom's sound system. Alexander, she said, her tone perfectly calm and controlled. I have something I'd like to share with your guests. The billionaire's confident expression faltered slightly. This wasn't the breakdown he had been expecting. Emma climbed the stairs to the stage, her pregnancy making the movement slightly awkward, but not diminishing her dignity. She reached for the microphone, and Alexander reluctantly handed it over, probably afraid that refusing would make him look even worse. Ladies and gentlemen, Emma began, her voice steady and strong. My husband is absolutely right about one thing tonight is about the future, but perhaps not the future he envisions. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. You see, for the past 3 months, I've been conducting my own investigation into my husband's activities. I wanted to understand why the man I loved had become so cold, so distant, so eager to paint me as mentally unstable. Alexander's face had gone pale. Emma, you're not well. Please let me help you. What I discovered, Emma continued, ignoring his interruption, was fascinating. Did you know that my husband has been planning my destruction since before I even became pregnant? That every romantic gesture, every declaration of love, every moment of our marriage has been an elaborate con game designed to give him access to my family's wealth and influence. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Emma pulled out her phone and connected it to the sound system. I thought you might like to hear it in his own words, she said, and pressed play. Alexander's voice filled the ballroom with crystal clarity. Emma served her purpose. She gave me access to the Rodriguez fortune and connections I could never have built on my own. The pregnancy just seals the deal. I'll have a child with Rodriguez blood, ensuring my place in their dynasty. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Gasps of shock and disgust rippled through the crowd. Some people started leaving immediately, wanting no part of the scandal that was unfolding. Others pulled out their phones, already posting to social media and texting journalists. But Emma wasn't finished. And Scarlett, she said, turning to face the other woman, I'm sure our guests would love to know about your previous relationships. The casino owner in Las Vegas who died so mysteriously. The oil executive in Texas who lost everything in that suspicious fire. Should I continue? Scarlett's face had gone white as a sheet. She tried to run, but found her path blocked by hotel security who had been quietly moving into position during Emma's speech. You see, Emma continued, her voice now carrying the full authority of the Rodriguez name. My husband made one crucial mistake. He assumed that because I chose love over business, I had forgotten how to fight. He thought that because I gave up my career for family, I had given up my power. Alexander was backing away from her, finally understanding that he had grossly underestimated his wife. But I am Santiago Rodriguez's daughter, Emma declared, her voice ringing with pride and strength. And the Rodriguez family does not forgive. We do not forget, and we certainly do not allow anyone to threaten our children. At that moment, the ballroom doors burst open, and Santiago Rodriguez himself strode in, flanked by a team of lawyers and federal agents. At 65, he was still an imposing figure, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the bearing of a man who had built an empire through sheer force of will. Ladies and gentlemen, Santiago announced, his voice carrying the authority of decades in power. I am Santiago Rodriguez, and I am here to collect my daughter and my grandchild. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea. Santiago Rodriguez was a legend in business circles, a man whose influence reached into every corner of American commerce and politics. His presence immediately shifted the entire dynamic of the room. As of this morning, Santiago continued, Rodriguez Industries has acquired 51% of Sterling Financial Empire through a series of strategic purchases. Alexander Sterling is hereby terminated from his position as CEO, effective immediately. Alexander's legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees on the stage. His empire, everything he had built, everything he had schemed to protect, was gone in an instant. Furthermore, Santiago said, Mr. Sterling is under federal investigation for money laundering, securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Miss Madison is being arrested for her role in multiple homicides across 3 states. FBI agents move forward to place Alexander and Scarlett under arrest. The man who had stood confidently on this stage just minutes ago was now being handcuffed while his mistress screamed about her innocence. Emma stood in the center of it all, one hand on her pregnant belly, watching the destruction of the people who had tried to destroy her. She felt no joy in their downfall, only a deep satisfaction that justice was finally being served. As Alexander was led away in handcuffs, he turned back to her with desperation in his eyes. Emma, please, he called out. I made mistakes, but I love you. I love our child. Don't let them do this. Emma looked at him with the cold contempt he deserved. You should have thought about that before you decided to bet against a Rodriguez, she replied. The ballroom was in complete chaos, now guests fleeing, reporters shouting questions, security trying to maintain order. But Emma felt a strange sense of peace descend over her. For the first time in months, she could breathe freely. Santiago approached his daughter and gently took her arm. Are you all right, mija? Emma nodded, tears finally beginning to fall. "I am now, Daddy." As they left the hotel together, Emma could hear the excited chatter of reporters already spinning the story that would dominate headlines around the world. Billionaire's pregnant wife destroys husband's empire at his own gala. But she wasn't thinking about the media circus that would follow. She was thinking about the future, her real future, the one she would build for herself and her child, free from the shadow of Alexander Sterling's deception. The first chapter of her new life was about to begin, 6 months after the gala that would forever be remembered as the Sterling Scandal. Emma Rodriguez sat in the penthouse office of what was now Rodriguez Sterling Corporation, watching the Los Angeles skyline shimmer in the morning sun. Her son, Santiago Rodriguez Jr., slept peacefully in a bassinet beside her desk, his tiny fist curled around a stuffed elephant, a gift from his grandfather. The transformation had been swift and decisive. Within days of Alexander's arrest, Emma had taken control of the Sterling financial empire, restructuring it completely and integrating it with Rodriguez Industries to create one of the world's most powerful conglomerates. Forbes had called it the fastest corporate takeover in modern history, while Wall Street Journal dubbed Emma the Phoenix Princess rising from betrayal to build an empire. But the path to this moment had not been without its challenges. The media attention following the gala had been overwhelming. Every tabloid and financial publication wanted the inside story of how the pregnant wife of a billionaire had orchestrated her husband's downfall in front of 500 witnesses. Emma had given exactly one interview to Barbara Walters, in which she had spoken with quiet dignity about the importance of protecting children from toxic relationships and the strength that comes from family support. "I did what any mother would do," she had said during that interview, her 3-month-old son sleeping in her arms. "I protected my child from people who would have used him as a pawn in their games of greed and manipulation." The interview had generated enormous sympathy for Emma and additional condemnation for Alexander, who was by then facing federal charges that would likely result in life imprisonment. Scarlett Madison had already been convicted and sentenced to death for her role in 3 murders, though her appeals would likely drag on for years. Emma's transformation from grieving wife to powerful CEO had surprised even those who knew her best. She had thrown herself into running the merged corporation with a fierce intelligence that reminded everyone why she had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School. Under her leadership, Rodriguez Sterling had not only survived the scandal, but had thrived, posting record profits in each of the quarters since the takeover. She had also launched the Strong Mothers Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women and children escape abusive relationships. The foundation provided legal aid, financial support, and safe housing for victims of domestic abuse, with particular focus on cases involving wealthy abusers who might otherwise escape justice through their connections and resources. Every woman deserves to be believed, protected, and empowered, Emma had said at the foundation's launch event. No one should have to face betrayal and abuse alone. The foundation had already helped hundreds of women and had attracted support from celebrities, politicians, and business leaders around the world. Emma's story had become a symbol of hope for women facing seemingly impossible circumstances. On this particular morning, Emma was preparing for what would be another milestone in her new life, the annual Rodriguez Sterling board meeting, where she would present the company's 5-year strategic plan. At 29, she was the youngest CEO in the Fortune 500, but she had already proven that age was no barrier to effective leadership. Her assistant, Maria Santos, knocked on the office door. "Mrs. Rodriguez, the board members are arriving." Emma had reclaimed her maiden name immediately after Alexander's arrest, wanting no legal or emotional connection to the man who had betrayed her so completely. Little Santiago bore the Rodriguez name as well, ensuring that he would grow up knowing his true heritage. "Thank you, Maria. I'll be right there." Emma picked up her son, who was just beginning to wake up, his dark eyes so much like her own, blinking in the morning light. Santiago Jr. was a beautiful baby, healthy and happy, completely unaware of the circumstances surrounding his birth. Emma was determined to keep it that way until he was old enough to understand the full story. "Come on, little prince," she whispered. "Let's go show the board how Rodriguez women get things done." The boardroom was a study in power and prestige. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Los Angeles, and the massive mahogany table was surrounded by the leaders of various divisions of the Rodriguez-Sterling empire. These were some of the most influential people in global business, and they all reported to Emma. As she entered the room carrying her son, the executives rose to their feet. This had become a tradition at Rodriguez-Sterling. Whenever Emma brought Santiago to a meeting, the entire room would stand in acknowledgement of the next generation of leadership. It was a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable in the old boys club atmosphere that had dominated corporate America for generations. "Good morning, everyone," Emma said, settling Santiago in his carrier before taking her place at the head of the table. "I hope you're ready for some exciting news." She activated the wall-mounted screens, which displayed a series of charts and projections that immediately captured everyone's attention. Rodriguez-Sterling Corporation has exceeded all projections for the third consecutive quarter. She began. "Our revenue is up 37% from last year. Our stock price has tripled since the restructuring, and we're on track to become the first Hispanic-led company to break into the top 5 of the Fortune 500. The room erupted in applause. When Emma had first taken control of the company, many analysts had predicted disaster. The scandal surrounding Alexander's arrest had initially sent stock prices plummeting, and competitors had moved quickly to try to poach Rodriguez-Sterling's clients. But Emma's decisive leadership and the strength of the Rodriguez brand had not only weathered the storm, but had emerged stronger than ever. "More importantly," Emma continued, "we're doing this while maintaining our commitment to ethical business practices and social responsibility. Our renewable energy division has secured contracts worth over $15 billion. Our tech sector is leading innovation in artificial intelligence applications for healthcare. And our real estate development projects are setting new standards for sustainable construction." Robert Chen, the head of the Asian Markets Division, raised his hand. "Emma, the Hong Kong expansion is proceeding ahead of schedule. The regulatory approval process has been surprisingly smooth." Emma smiled. "That's because we're not cutting corners or bribing officials. Robert, when you conduct business with integrity, doors open naturally." This had been one of Emma's first major policy changes, eliminating the questionable practices that Alexander had used to accelerate deal-making. While some competitors had mocked this approach as naive, Rodriguez-Sterling's reputation for ethical business had actually attracted partners and clients who wanted to work with a company they could trust. "What about the European markets?" asked Isabella Morrison, the company's chief financial officer. "That brings me to our next major announcement," Emma said, clicking to a new slide. "Rodriguez-Sterling has been selected as the primary partner for the European Union's Green Energy Initiative, a $100 billion project to transform Europe's energy infrastructure over the next decade." The silence in the room was profound. Landing the EU contract was considered the holy grail of international business. Hundreds of companies had competed for the opportunity, including several that were larger and more established than Rodriguez-Sterling. "How did we manage that?" asked David Kim, head of the energy division. "By being the best," Emma replied simply. "Our technology is superior, our track record is impeccable, and our vision aligns with Europe's sustainability goals. But more than that, they trust us. In a world where corporate scandals seem to break every week, Rodriguez-Sterling represents stability and integrity." The applause this time was thunderous. Landing the EU contract would cement Rodriguez-Sterling's position as a global leader and provide a foundation for growth that would last for generations. As the meeting continued, Emma outlined her vision for the company's future expansion into emerging markets, investment in cutting-edge research and development, and continued commitment to social responsibility initiatives. She spoke with the passion and knowledge of someone who had been born to lead, but also with the hard-won wisdom of someone who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. During a break in the meeting, Emma stepped out onto the executive balcony to get some fresh air. Los Angeles stretched out below her, a sprawling metropolis that represented both dreams and disappointments for millions of people. She thought about how different her life had become in just 2 years, from the naive wife of a scheming billionaire to the leader of a corporate empire. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and saw it was from Dr. Michael Chen, a pediatric cardiologist at Cedars-Sinai, who had become Santiago's doctor and, increasingly, an important person in Emma's life. Hope the board meeting is going well. Santiago has an appointment next week for his 6-month checkup. Dinner tonight to celebrate your EU victory. I promise to keep my medical opinions about proper nutrition to myself. Emma smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the California sunshine. Michael was different from any man she had ever known, brilliant but humble, successful but compassionate, powerful but gentle. They had met when Santiago was born with a minor heart murmur that required monitoring, and their professional relationship had gradually evolved into something deeper. Unlike Alexander, whose charm had been calculated and manipulative, Michael's kindness felt genuine. He was genuinely interested in Emma's work, supportive of her goals, and completely devoted to Santiago's well-being. He had made it clear that he had no interest in Emma's wealth or status as a world-renowned pediatric surgeon. He had built his own successful career and reputation. Board meeting exceeding expectations. She texted back, "Dinner sounds perfect. Can you handle Santiago for a few hours afterward? I have some foundation work to catch up on." "Always. That kid is better company than most adults anyway." Emma's smile widened. Michael had fallen in love with Santiago almost as quickly as he had fallen in love with her. The little boy had never known Alexander. His father had been arrested when Santiago was still in the womb, but he was growing up surrounded by love and positive male role models like his grandfather and Michael. She returned to the boardroom, where the executives were discussing implementation timelines for the European project. As she listened to their plans and strategies, Emma felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what she had been born to do, not to be a trophy wife or a social butterfly, but to build something meaningful that would last beyond her own lifetime. "There's one more item on today's agenda," Emma said as the meeting wound down. "I want to discuss the Sterling Foundation." The room grew quiet. Emma had been deliberately vague about her plans for the charitable foundation that Alexander had established as a tax write-off and public relations tool. "As you know, the foundation has significant assets, over $200 million, that Alexander accumulated through various questionable means. I've been working with our legal team and federal prosecutors to ensure that this money is used for legitimate charitable purposes." She clicked to a new presentation slide showing a detailed plan for restructuring the foundation. "The Sterling Foundation will be dissolved and its assets transferred to the Strong Mothers Foundation, which will expand its mission to include supporting children whose lives have been affected by parental abuse or abandonment. We'll fund counseling services, educational scholarships, and legal advocacy programs." "That's a beautiful gesture." "Emma," said Isabella Morrison, "Alexander's ill-gotten gains will actually help heal the kind of damage he tried to inflict." "Justice isn't always about punishment," Emma replied. "Sometimes it's about transformation, taking something poisonous and turning it into medicine." As the board meeting concluded, Emma felt a familiar sense of anticipation. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities, but also the satisfaction of building something larger than herself. Rodriguez Sterling was no longer just a business empire. It was becoming a force for positive change in the world. That evening, as she prepared for dinner with Michael, Emma received an unexpected phone call from Marcus Thompson, the private investigator who had helped her gather evidence against Alexander. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said, his voice carrying an unusual urgency, "I thought you should know Alexander's lawyers filed an appeal today. They're claiming he was set up, that the evidence was fabricated." Emma felt a familiar chill run down her spine. "That's impossible. We have recordings, videos, financial documents. I know, and the appeal will probably fail, but they're also claiming that Alexander has new information about other crimes, information that could be valuable to federal prosecutors. They're fishing for a plea bargain." Emma sank into her office chair, her mind racing. Alexander had been sentenced to 45 years in federal prison, but if he could provide information leading to other convictions, He might be able to reduce his sentence significantly. What kind of information? She asked. Unknown at this point, but Mrs. Rodriguez, there's something else. Someone's been asking questions about you hiring private investigators, digging into your background and your family's business dealings, professional work, expensive. Who? That's what we're trying to find out. But whoever it is has serious resources and serious motivation. Emma felt the old familiar anger rising in her chest. Even from prison, Alexander was apparently still trying to destroy her life, but she was no longer the naive young woman he had manipulated so easily. Marcus, I want you to find out who's behind this investigation. Use whatever resources you need. The full backing of Rodriguez Sterling Corporation is behind you. Already on it. I'll have preliminary information within 48 hours. As Emma hung up the phone, she looked out at the Los Angeles skyline and made a silent promise to her sleeping son. No one would ever again threaten their family, their peace, or their future. She had learned to fight, and she had learned to win. Alexander Sterling had taught her many things during their marriage, though not the lessons he had intended. He had taught her that love without trust is meaningless, that power without integrity is hollow, and that underestimating a Rodriguez woman is always a fatal mistake. Now someone else was about to learn those same lessons the hard way. Emma picked up her phone and sent Michael a text. Rain check on dinner, family business has come up. His response came back immediately. Everything okay? Do you need anything? Emma smiled, feeling grateful for the first time in years to have someone who cared about her well-being without any ulterior motives. Just Rodriguez family business. Nothing I can't handle. But I love you for asking. Love you too. Give Santiago a kiss from Uncle Michael. As Emma prepared to leave the office and dive back into battle, she felt the same steel resolve that had carried her through the darkest moments of her marriage and divorce. She was no longer fighting just for herself. She was fighting for her son, for the women helped by her foundation, and for the principle that justice should never be for sale. Alexander Sterling had made the mistake of thinking that destroying her would be easy. Now someone else was making the same error. They were all about to learn that Emma Rodriguez was just getting started. 2 weeks after Marcus Thompson's warning phone call, Emma sat in the executive conference room of Rodriguez Sterling Corporation, surrounded by a war council that would have intimidated heads of state. Her father Santiago occupied the chair to her right, his silver hair gleaming under the crystal chandelier as he reviewed legal documents with the intense focus that had built his empire. To her left sat Jennifer Walsh, the most feared litigation attorney on the West Coast, whose perfect record in high-stakes corporate warfare had earned her the nickname the Executioner. Across the table, Marcus Thompson spread out surveillance photographs and financial records like a general planning a military campaign. FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen, who had led the original investigation into Alexander's crimes, sat at the far end of the table with a grim expression that suggested the news was worse than Emma had anticipated. What do we know? Emma asked, her voice steady, despite the tension crackling through the room. Marcus cleared his throat and gestured to the photographs. The investigation into your family's business practices is being funded by someone with essentially unlimited resources. They've hired 3 separate private investigation firms, 2 forensic accounting teams, and at least 1 former CIA operative who specializes in corporate espionage. Any idea who's paying for all this? Santiago asked, his tone carrying the dangerous quiet that Emma remembered from her childhood, the voice her father used just before he destroyed his enemies. That's where it gets interesting, Agent Chen interjected. The money is flowing through a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts, but we've managed to trace some of it back to its source. You're not going to like this. She slid a file folder across the table to Emma. Inside was a photograph that made Emma's blood run cold. Victoria Sterling, Alexander's mother, stepping out of a Rolls-Royce in front of a Swiss bank. I thought she was out of the picture, Emma said. After Alexander's arrest, she disappeared from public life completely. She's been busy, Agent Chen replied. Victoria Sterling has spent the last year liquidating assets, calling in favors, and assembling what can only be described as a revenge fund. She's operating under the assumption that her son was set up, And she's determined to prove it. Jennifer Walsh leaned forward, her predatory instincts engaged. What's her endgame? Alexander is facing life in prison. Even if she could somehow discredit the evidence against him, the damage to his reputation and business empire is irreversible. She's not trying to save Alexander's empire, Marcus explained. She's trying to destroy Emma's. The investigation she's funding is looking for any possible irregularity in Rodriguez Industries' business practices going back 30 years. She wants to find something, anything, that she can use to bring down the Rodriguez family and take custody of Santiago Jr. Emma felt her protective instincts flare. Over my dead body. That might be the plan, Agent Chen said grimly. 3 of the people working for Victoria Sterling have connections to professional fixers, the kind of people who make problems disappear permanently. We've been monitoring their communications, and they've been asking very specific questions about your security arrangements, your daily routines, and your son's schedule. Santiago's hand clenched into a fist on the conference table. If that woman thinks she can threaten my daughter and grandson, she's about to find out what happens when you declare war on the Rodriguez family. Emma interrupted, her voice carrying a steel edge that surprised even her. What's our timeline? Victoria is planning something big for the anniversary of Alexander's arrest, Marcus replied. 2 weeks from today, we don't know exactly what, but she's called in every favor and spent every dollar to make it happen. Emma stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Los Angeles. The city sprawled beneath her like a living organism, full of dreams and ambitions and struggles. Somewhere out there, a bitter old woman was plotting to destroy everything Emma had built, to tear Santiago Jr. away from the only family he had ever known. What do we know about Victoria's allies? Emma asked. That's the concerning part, Agent Chen replied. She's managed to convince several European investors that the Rodriguez family is involved in money laundering and tax evasion. They're threatening to pull out of the EU Green Energy Initiative unless a full investigation is conducted. Emma felt her stomach drop. The European contract was worth $100 billion and represented the foundation of Rodriguez Sterling's growth strategy for the next decade. If they lost it, the company would survive, but the damage to their reputation and future prospects would be enormous. It gets worse, Jennifer Walsh added. Victoria has also convinced a federal judge in New York to consider a motion for Alexander's conviction to be overturned based on alleged prosecutorial misconduct. If that succeeds, he could be released pending a new trial. And then he'd immediately file for custody of Santiago Jr., Emma concluded, the full scope of Victoria's plan becoming clear. She's trying to attack us on multiple fronts, simultaneously: business reputation, criminal charges, and family custody. Even if we win on 2 fronts, losing on any one of them could be catastrophic. Santiago stood and moved to stand beside his daughter at the window. Mija, we've faced worse enemies than Victoria Sterling. Remember when the Castillo family tried to force us out of the Miami market? Or when Senator Morrison attempted to block our federal contracts? Emma nodded, drawing strength from her father's presence. The Rodriguez family had not survived and thrived for 3 generations by backing down from fights. But this is different, she said. Those were business disputes. This is personal. Victoria isn't just trying to win, she's trying to destroy us completely. Then we'll have to destroy her first, Santiago replied matter-of-factly. Marcus, what do we know about Victoria's finances and operations? Marcus smiled, the expression of a hunter who had found his prey. Quite a lot, actually. Victoria made one crucial mistake. She assumed that, because she was operating through shell companies and offshore accounts, she was invisible. But Rodriguez Industries has partnerships with intelligence agencies around the world, and the Sterling name still triggers automatic monitoring in financial centers from London to Hong Kong. He spread out a new set of documents. Victoria has been funding her operations by selling assets that technically belong to Alexander's estate assets that should be frozen pending the resolution of his criminal cases. She's also been bribing officials in 3 different countries to access information that should be classified. That's multiple felonies, Jennifer Walsh said with obvious satisfaction. Financial fraud, obstruction of justice, conspiracy. International bribery, we could have her arrested within 24 hours. No, Emma said firmly. If we arrest her now, we'll never know the full scope of her network or what other surprises she has planned. I want to let her make her move, then crush her completely. Agent Chen looked concerned. Emma, if we wait and she's planning something violent, she won't risk direct violence. Emma interrupted. Victoria Sterling is many things, but she's not stupid. She knows that any harm to me or Santiago Jr. would immediately point back to her. She's planning something more sophisticated. Emma turned back to face the War Council, her mind already working through possibilities and contingencies. Marcus, I want complete surveillance on Victoria and everyone working for her. Jennifer, prepare countersuit documents for everything we can think of. Defamation, harassment, conspiracy, fraud. Agent Chen, coordinate with international law enforcement to monitor Victoria's communications. What about the European situation? Santiago asked. If Victoria manages to convince the EU to launch an investigation, then we'll give them the most comprehensive audit in corporate history, Emma replied. Rodriguez Industries has nothing to hide. Our books are clean, our practices are ethical, and our track record speaks for itself. Let Victoria waste her money trying to find dirt that doesn't exist. And Alexander's appeal? Jennifer asked. Emma's smile was cold and calculating. I'm going to make sure that appeal fails so spectacularly that no judge will ever consider another one. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma orchestrated a defense that combined the resources of a multinational corporation with the determination of a mother protecting her child. Rodriguez Sterling's legal team compiled thousands of pages of documentation proving the company's ethical practices and financial transparency. Emma personally flew to Brussels to meet with EU officials, presenting evidence of Victoria's bribery attempts and providing complete access to Rodriguez Sterling's internal records. Meanwhile, Marcus Thompson's surveillance operation uncovered the full extent of Victoria's conspiracy. She had recruited former Sterling financial employees who felt they had been unfairly terminated after Alexander's arrest. She had bribed journalists to plant negative stories about the Rodriguez family in European financial publications. Most damaging of all, she had been feeding information to Alexander's legal team, helping them craft their appeal based on inside knowledge of the original investigation. The confrontation Emma had been expecting came on a Tuesday morning in early March. She was in her office, reviewing financial projections with Santiago Jr., playing contentedly in his playpen nearby, when Maria Santos burst through the door with an expression of barely controlled panic. Mrs. Rodriguez, you need to see this right now. Maria turned on the wall-mounted television, which was tuned to CNN. The breaking news banner read, Explosive allegations against Rodriguez family. Exclusive investigation reveals decades of corruption. Emma watched in stunned silence as Victoria Sterling appeared on screen, sitting across from Anderson Cooper in what appeared to be an exclusive interview. The older woman looked every inch the grieving mother dressed in black, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression a mixture of sorrow and righteous anger. My son Alexander made mistakes, Victoria was saying, her voice trembling with what appeared to be genuine emotion. But he was set up by the Rodriguez family as part of a conspiracy that goes back decades. Emma Rodriguez used her family's criminal connections to frame my son for crimes that her own family committed. Anderson Cooper leaned forward with professional skepticism. Those are serious allegations. Mrs. Sterling, what evidence do you have to support these claims? Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder. Financial records proving that Rodriguez Industries has been laundering money for drug cartels since the 1990s. Bank statements showing illegal transfers to offshore accounts. And most damning of all, recorded conversations between Santiago Rodriguez and known criminal associates discussing how to eliminate anyone who threatened their operations. Emma felt the world tilt around her. She knew the allegations were false. Her family's business had always operated within the law. But Victoria's presentation was convincing, complete with what appeared to be legitimate documents and recordings. Furthermore, Victoria continued, I have evidence that Emma Rodriguez deliberately seduced my son as part of a planned takeover of Sterling Financial. the pregnancy, the marriage, even the charity gala where she supposedly exposed Alexander's infidelity, all of it was orchestrated to steal his company and destroy his reputation. Emma's phone was already ringing with calls from reporters, board members, and government officials. The stock price of Rodriguez Sterling Corporation was plummeting in real time as investors panic sold their shares. "Maria, get my father on the phone immediately," Emma said, her mind racing through response strategies. "Then call Jennifer Walsh and Agent Chen. We need an emergency meeting in the conference room in 30 minutes. As her assistant rushed to make the calls, Emma stared at the television screen where Victoria Sterling was completing her character assassination with practiced precision. The woman had clearly been planning this moment for months, crafting a narrative that would be difficult to disprove quickly and devastating in its immediate impact. But Emma Rodriguez had not survived her husband's betrayal and built a corporate empire by backing down from fights. If Victoria Sterling wanted a war, she would get one, but she had just made the same mistake that Alexander had made 2 years earlier. She had underestimated the power and determination of a Rodriguez woman protecting her family. Emma picked up Santiago Jr., who was blissfully unaware of the crisis unfolding around him, and kissed his forehead gently. "Don't worry, baby," she whispered. "Mommy is going to teach this woman the same lessons she taught your biological father. No one threatens the Rodriguez family and walks away unscathed." The final battle was about to begin. The war room at Rodriguez Sterling Corporation hummed with controlled chaos as Emma assembled the most formidable team of legal and public relations experts money could buy. Outside, protesters gathered with signs reading "Rodriguez Family Crime Syndicate" and "Justice for Alexander Sterling," their chants echoing through the canyon of downtown skyscrapers. Inside, Emma stood at the head of the conference table like a general preparing for the battle that would determine her family's survival. Victoria Sterling's CNN interview had detonated like a nuclear bomb in the business world. Within hours, Rodriguez Sterling's stock had lost 40% of its value. The European Union had suspended negotiations on the Green Energy Initiative, pending a full investigation. Federal prosecutors were being pressured to reopen the Sterling case. Most devastating of all, a family court judge in New York had issued a temporary restraining order requiring Emma to surrender custody of Santiago Jr. to neutral parties until paternity and fitness hearings could be conducted. "How bad is it?" Emma asked Jennifer Walsh, who was coordinating responses from a dozen law firms across multiple jurisdictions. "Bad," Jennifer replied without sugarcoating the situation. "Victoria's evidence is sophisticated, not just fabricated documents, but deep fakes of audio recordings, manipulated bank records, and testimony from witnesses who appear credible on the surface. Someone spent millions of dollars creating a false narrative that will take months to fully debunk." "We don't have months," Santiago said grimly. "Every day this story dominates the news cycle. We lose more credibility and more business relationships." Agent Chen looked up from her laptop with the first piece of good news they'd had all day. "But we do have something Victoria doesn't know we have. The NSA has been monitoring international financial crimes networks, and Victoria's bribery payments to European officials triggered automatic surveillance protocols. We have recordings of her coordinating this entire campaign, including conversations where she explicitly admits to fabricating evidence." Emma felt a surge of hope. "How quickly can we get those recordings?" "That's the problem," Agent Chen replied. "The recordings are classified, and it could take weeks to get them declassified through official channels. By then, the damage might be irreversible." "What about unofficial channels?" Emma asked, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. Agent Chen shook her head. "Emma, I can't officially advise you to—" "I'm not asking for official advice," Emma interrupted. "I'm asking what a concerned mother might hypothetically be able to accomplish if she had the right connections and the right motivation." Santiago smiled grimly. "Mija, you're starting to sound like your grandmother. She always said that when the law moves too slowly, sometimes justice has to find its own path." Before Agent Chen could respond, Marcus Thompson burst into the conference room with an expression of urgent excitement. "Emma, you need to see this. Now!" He connected his laptop to the room's main screen, which immediately displayed security camera footage from what appeared to be Victoria Sterling's mansion. "This is from last night," Marcus explained. "Victoria thought she was being clever by meeting with her co-conspirators at her house instead of in public. But she forgot that her own security system records everything, and our sources were able to access those recordings." The footage showed Victoria Sterling in her elegantly appointed living room, surrounded by 5 people Emma recognized from their surveillance photos: the private investigators, corrupt journalists, and former Sterling financial employees who had been helping orchestrate the smear campaign. "Play the audio," Emma commanded. Victoria's voice filled the conference room with crystal clarity. "I don't care if the evidence is fake, as long as it's convincing. The Rodriguez family destroyed my son's life, and I'm going to return the favor. By the time I'm finished with them, Emma Rodriguez will be in prison, her bastard child will be in foster care, and Santiago Rodriguez will be bankrupt." One of the men in the footage leaned forward. "Mrs. Sterling, some of these fabricated documents could be traced back to us. If federal investigators are idiots," Victoria interrupted with contempt. "They believed our fake evidence against my son, and they'll believe our fake evidence against the Rodriguez family. The key is making sure the story spreads faster than they can investigate it." Emma felt a cold satisfaction wash over her. Victoria had just confessed to multiple felonies on camera, in her own home, surrounded by witnesses. That's conspiracy, obstruction of justice, fraud, and perjury, Jennifer Walsh said with obvious delight. "With multiple witnesses and video evidence, Victoria Sterling just handed us everything we need to destroy her." "How quickly can we get this to the media?" Emma asked. 10 minutes, Marcus replied. "I've already prepared packages for every major news network, newspaper, and online publication. Victoria's interview may have dominated the morning news cycle, but her confession will own the evening." Emma stood and walked to the windows overlooking Los Angeles, her mind already moving beyond the immediate crisis to the larger implications of what Victoria had attempted. "Jennifer, while Marcus is distributing that video, I want you to file criminal complaints against Victoria and every person in that room. I want them arrested before the evening news airs." "Already working on it," Jennifer replied, her fingers flying across her tablet. "I've been in touch with federal prosecutors in 3 jurisdictions. Arrest warrants should be issued within the hour." "What about the European situation?" Santiago asked. Emma turned back to face the room, her expression reflecting the steel resolve that had carried her through every crisis in her life. "I'm flying to Brussels tonight," she announced. "I'm going to meet personally with every EU official who has questions about our business practices. I'm going to provide them with complete access to our financial records, our internal communications, and our operational procedures. By the time I'm finished, they'll understand that Rodriguez Sterling Corporation represents exactly the kind of ethical business partner they need for the green energy initiative." "And the custody situation?" Agent Chen asked quietly. Emma's expression softened as she thought about Santiago Jr., who was currently staying with her father under the protection of a small army of security personnel. Once Victoria's confession goes public and she's arrested for conspiracy, the custody order will be thrown out immediately. No judge is going to separate a child from his mother based on evidence provided by a convicted felon. Over the next 48 hours, Emma orchestrated a counterattack that would be studied in business schools and law schools for decades to come. Victoria Sterling's confession video went viral within hours of its release, generating more than 50 million views and completely reversing public opinion about the Rodriguez family. Justice for Emma began trending on social media as people shared their outrage about Victoria's manipulation of the legal system. Victoria and her co-conspirators were arrested on federal charges before the evening news even finished covering their confession. The former Sterling financial employees faced additional charges for violating their plea agreements from Alexander's original case. The corrupt journalists were fired and faced professional sanctions that would end their careers. Most satisfying of all, Alexander Sterling's appeal was not only denied, but resulted in additional charges being filed against him for conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction of justice. His sentence was extended to life without possibility of parole. Emma's personal appearance before the European Union's investigative committee was broadcast live across Europe and became a masterclass in crisis management and corporate transparency. She answered every question with detailed precision, provided documentation for every transaction the committee requested, and even invited EU inspectors to conduct surprise audits of any Rodriguez Sterling facility they chose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emma said in her closing statement to the committee, "my family has built our business on three principles: integrity, transparency, and social responsibility. We have never and will never compromise those values for short-term profit. The Rodriguez Sterling Corporation is not just a business, it's a commitment to building a better future for everyone." The committee voted unanimously to reinstate Rodriguez Sterling as the primary contractor for the Green Energy Initiative, with several members publicly apologizing for allowing the investigation to proceed based on fraudulent evidence. 6 months later, Emma stood in the same Beverly Hills hotel ballroom where her nightmare had begun 3 years earlier. But this time, she was hosting a celebration, the annual Strong Mothers Foundation Gala, which had raised over $50 million to support women and children escaping abusive relationships. The ballroom was filled with survivors, supporters, and celebrities who had come to honor Emma's work in transforming personal tragedy into social change. Santiago Jr., now a happy toddler, sat in his high chair at the head table, clapping his hands as speakers told stories of hope and healing. Emma took the stage to deliver the evening's keynote address, wearing a flowing midnight blue gown that reminded everyone present of the pregnant woman who had once stood on this same stage to expose her husband's betrayal. 3 years ago, Emma began, her voice carrying easily through the ballroom's sound system, I stood on this stage as a victim betrayed, humiliated, and afraid for my unborn child's future. Tonight, I stand here as a survivor, an advocate, and most importantly, as proof that no one's worst moment has to define their future. The applause was immediate and sustained. In the audience, Emma could see faces of women she had helped through the foundation, women who had escaped violent marriages, won custody battles against abusive ex-husbands, and rebuilt their lives with dignity and strength. The Strong Mothers Foundation exists because I learned that healing comes not from revenge, but from purpose, Emma continued. When we transform our pain into power to help others, we don't just survive, we thrive. As she spoke, Emma caught sight of Michael Chen at their table, holding Santiago Jr. on his lap and smiling with pride. They had married 6 months earlier in a simple ceremony at the Rodriguez family ranch, surrounded by people who loved them for who they were, not what they owned. Michael had legally adopted Santiago Jr., giving the little boy a father who chose to love him rather than one who had tried to use him. Emma was also 6 months pregnant with their second child, a daughter they planned to name Sophia, after Emma's grandmother, who had been the first woman to run a major corporation in Mexico. But tonight is not just about looking back, Emma said, returning her focus to the audience. It's about looking forward to the future we're building together. Next year, the Strong Mothers Foundation will open its first residential facility, a safe haven where women and children can rebuild their lives without fear. We'll provide housing, counseling, legal advocacy, job training, and childcare for up to 500 families at a time. The announcement generated another wave of applause. Emma had personally funded the facility with a $100 million donation, making it the largest privately funded domestic violence shelter in the world. Most importantly, Emma concluded, we're creating a future where children like my son, Santiago, will grow up knowing that love means protection, not possession, that strength means lifting others up, not tearing them down, and that justice means ensuring everyone has the chance to write their own happy ending. As the gala concluded with a standing ovation, Emma felt a deep sense of peace that had eluded her for years. She had not just survived Alexander Sterling's betrayal and Victoria Sterling's revenge, she had transformed those experiences into something meaningful and lasting. Later that evening, as Emma and Michael tucked Santiago Jr. into his bed at their Malibu home, The little boy looked up at them with the trust and innocence that every child deserves. Mama, he said in his toddler vocabulary. Story. Emma smiled and settled into the rocking chair beside his bed. Once upon a time, she began, there was a little prince who was loved more than all the stars in the sky. As she told her son a fairy tale, Emma reflected on the real story of their lives, a story that had begun with betrayal and pain, but had evolved into something beautiful. Santiago Jr. would grow up knowing he was chosen, loved, and protected. He would learn about his biological father when he was old enough to understand. But that would be just one chapter in a much larger story of family, love, and triumph. Outside their home, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its waves carrying away the last traces of old hurts and broken promises. Emma Rodriguez had learned that the best revenge was not destruction, but creation building something so beautiful and meaningful that the people who had tried to tear her down became irrelevant footnotes in a much larger story. In her study, a framed copy of Forbes magazine hung on the wall, the issue that had named her CEO of the Year and recognized Rodriguez Sterling Corporation as the most ethical company in America. But the honor that meant the most to Emma was a handwritten letter from a woman named Sarah, whose abusive ex-husband had been prosecuted using legal strategies pioneered by the Strong Mothers Foundation's advocacy team. You saved my life and my children's lives, the letter read. Thank you for showing us that we didn't have to accept cruelty as our fate. That was Emma's true legacy, not the billions of dollars in revenue or the awards on her wall, but the lives she had touched and the futures she had helped create. Alexander Sterling had tried to use her for his own selfish purposes, never understanding that her real power came not from her family's wealth, but from her capacity to love, protect, and inspire others. Victoria Sterling had tried to destroy her with lies and manipulation, never realizing that truth has a power that no amount of money can buy. Both had learned too late that underestimating a Rodriguez woman was always a fatal mistake. As Emma turned off the lights in Santiago Jr.'s room and headed downstairs to join Michael for a quiet evening together, she felt grateful for every twist and turn their story had taken. The pain had been real, but it had led to joy that was equally real. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had taught her to recognize and cherish authentic love. Most importantly, the experience had shown her that she was stronger than she had ever imagined possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to make a difference in the world. But tonight, Emma Rodriguez was exactly where she belonged, home with the family she had chosen and the life she had built from the ashes of someone else's cruelty. And she had never been happier. This story serves as a reminder that justice may be delayed, but it is never truly denied, that love conquers fear, truth overcomes deception, and the strength to rebuild is always greater than the power to destroy. Most importantly, it proves that our worst moments don't define us, our response to them does.